How do you think funding has changed since then, in terms of for the centre itself? How has it affected the centre and the services in the centre?
I suppose even if you take my role as the coordinator, I mean, I initially would have been on a 3-year funding cycle, then it went to a 1-year funding cycle, and now I'm on a 6-month funding package, which runs out at the end of September, and that has a lot of repercussions on long-term experienced staff who may have other responsibilities, childcare, mortgage, that I think there's a sort of drain in the sector now, where people are really forced to go into jobs that offer more permanency. And I suppose at the moment we have something like 18 funders involved in Windsor Women's Centre for a budget of about 400,000 a year. I mean, they get fantastic value for money, with 343 women completed classes last year, 198 kids through childcare per week. You know, the statistics are there in most of the centres or networks or whatever to back up the value for money. It's really sort of trying to find a chink in a way through, and as it happens, because women, you know, are holistic in their approach, we're not fitting into the sort of set boxes. So we're hoping now that there's been the government review board that have met, and a report has gone to the new minister, that we're going to get some satisfaction now. And I suppose what we'd be looking for is this sort of package of funding. We're not looking to any one government body to pick it up. I mean, we're really looking to sort of DSD to pick up core costs and infrastructure, and then health and education. And I appreciate there may not be existing funding streams that we can tie into, but what we're really looking for is a will to find a way. So we're really excited about this report, and we're really hoping the Minister's going to come up with a very innovatory vision of a way forward of sustaining the women's sector, because the evidence of the work we do is there. It's not about justifying what we do, it's about finding a way.
And I suppose the one difference that there is for the rural women's sector is that they fall between 2 departments, and they really have over the years suffered badly from that, because they are community organisations, they are women's organisations, but they are rural. So what has happened is the DSDs, or the government departments who deal with the voluntary and community sector, once they see rural attached to it, because we have the Department of Agriculture and Rural Development, they see it as the Department of Agriculture and Rural Development role. But the Department of Agriculture and Rural Development, because they're community sector organisations, will say, no, that's a different department they deal with. So they really have been ad hoc and back against the walls continually over the past couple of years. And very much, as Eleanor said, losing good people because their contracts are 2 months ahead, 3 months ahead. And good people who could be providing services for women who are spending their time filling out funding applications or monitoring forms, because you have 18 different funding streams coming into the one centre. It's just not time efficient.
I suppose one of the great things that came alongside the government review on the women's sector was the fact that we had to look at a sort of proper infrastructure for Northern Ireland, and at the moment, in a very short period of time, really from the Minister's announcement on the 16th of March, we've set up 3 advisory groups. So there's the Greater Belfast, there's Derry, North West, and all the rural women's networks. And I'm hoping that the 3 greater advisory groups, I mean, there's much more strength in numbers. Plus, for me, I didn't know anything really about the rural networks. It's really interesting. I'm from a farming background, so it's really interesting to learn what is going out there in, you know, other parts of Northern Ireland. So I'm hoping that this sort of new infrastructure approach will make it all much stronger, that we can work together and support each other where difficulties arise.
Absolutely. And I suppose, you know, just as I'm listening to the two of you, you're seeing then the potential for a big gap. Even if this funding does come through and does support the infrastructure and the core costs for organisations, there's a whole layer of activity amongst small women's groups, which is at risk of being totally lost. And when Eleanor was referring back to funders that funded our projects years ago, those trust funds cared about that type of work and placed a big focus on a holistic approach and about people's growth and development and their capacity to move through change. That funding that we're referring to refers to protecting the infrastructure and the core posts of the larger organisations. And I suppose my wish or my dream would be that trust funds that have engaged with us in the past would come back and see again that as a priority, because whilst some women have developed and progressed and moved on, there are a lot of other women who've yet to get the first step. And my big concern would be that the focus shifts away from those women, particularly the women that you're talking about that are more isolated and more vulnerable in their communities. And even though we would be based in a large city where people do have access to a lot of programmes, the people that usually are motivated to come to us are people who are that wee bit further down the line than the woman who could potentially be sitting at home with children, perhaps on medication from her GP, perhaps alone parent, perhaps with dependents, older dependents, but not having the time or the motivation to get her first step towards progress in her life or doing something for herself. And those would be the women that I would be concerned about.
I think it's again, it's something that we've discussed about, like, for example, like we have Women into Politics who deliver training on political education skills and targeting grassroots women, and again, government will not see this as a priority, and yet we know there is a need in terms of getting more women into decision making.
But again, that's all about flavours and government being able to shift when a mood changes.
That's right.
My recollection of the peace process was that Women into Politics was a very big project in government's eyes, because the drive was then coming from Europe and America to increase the number of women participating in political life here. And our government got on board with that and really pushed it and made room for women into politics at that particular time. But that was because it suited them then. And that opened up so much room for so many women. I remember in Footprints Women's Centre there was a big fear around talking about politics because of the obvious felt consequences of that, and Women into Politics were the first organisation that opened up that discussion for women. It's something that we still feel people shy away from, because there still is not an end game has been played out to the peace process. People are still afraid to talk about politics and need a safe place to be created. So whilst we would be seeing an even bigger need for women into politics, the trend would be that it could potentially have had its day, which we don't see as the case by far. We just see it as a project that's starting off, and there's a great need for it. I don't